There we go. So hopefully.
There. Everything's going on.
Perfect. We're now live. Great. So wonderful. So let me get to screen share. All right. So welcome to week 2 of the Multicolored Gospel. Again, this is our first program that'll be part of our 75th anniversary celebration. And I think what we were super excited about was last week we had over 40 participants online and in person. And we went well over time, but that was due to your enthusiasm and insights. So really just a kind of a fantastic start for all of us as we start this class together. Just to kind of review briefly what we talked about last week. So we spent a little bit of time talking about the Vesica Pisces shape, which is also known as the Mandorla, which is Italian for almond, so kind of that pointed almond shape. And we talked about how it is this shape commonly associated with Jesus, both on kind of a philosophical level, as Jesus is both fully God and fully human, and that kind of overlap of the Venn diagram of Jesus's identity. But also it's a symbol of the fish, so that ichthus, which is itself a anagram for Jesus Christ, Son of God and Savior. So so this Mandorla shape, I think, is kind of the prominent motif of our stained glass, and so we talked about that shape. Welcome all, welcome all. Oops, there we go. So again, we see this shape throughout the kind of the gospel windows. And then we also kind of talked through the kind of other repetitive design elements of our stained glass, and among them is the prominent use of blue. And just as a reminder of our history, the blue was the reason why our first vicar and the senior warden hated the stained glass when it was first installed. They thought it was too dark. Opinions change over the years. So Barbara, would you like to share, for those of you who are online, can you say one more time what we think this shape might be?
So I texted Mel Alborn, who used to be a member. She has moved to Carmel. She is a nationally active artist in illumination at Sacred Art, and does, she doesn't do stained glass. She does manuscript, but she also does altars. She does like full-on crosses and everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, her interpretation of the Nautilus swirl thing is, she said they're acanthus leaves.
Okay.
So what John Lee pointed out, they're an element in Gregorian columns.
Yeah.
So a decorative element.
So before we get too far, Cheryl or Nancy, I see that you're unmuted. Can you hear Barbara speaking okay? We've got a new microphone set up tonight. Or anybody listening online?
Yes, difficult to hear.
Difficult to hear? Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue to work on, we've got a new camera coming for next week, so it didn't quite arrive in time, but we'll work on improving our microphones for in-room audio. So, okay. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. What?
There was a Prime delivery as you were starting.
With a huge box.
It's not, we didn't order it from Amazon, unfortunately. So it hopefully will be here tomorrow. So. And then near the bottom, what we noticed is this kind of medallion, which is almost always depicted in the gold, actually always depicted in the gold color. And this is a way in which we can, it's often an interpretive tool for what's going on in the scene above. So it kind of helps us understand what's going on. So And then for those of you who are joining us for the first time, the two kind of main questions that we ask with every installation is kind of what do you notice and what are you wondering about? The overwhelming kind of thesis of this class is that we're all experts in our own experience, and all of our experience will bring something to bear on these windows. I am not an art major. Karen McGuinn, our art major, is online, so we can get away with a few more things than we might otherwise be able to if she wasn't calling us on our nonsense. So, but just, this is the question we ask every single frame. What do we notice? What do we wonder? It puts us all on, I think, on equal footing for reminding us that we're all experts, that we all have something that is valid when it comes to interpreting these pieces of art. So, and then for our friends online, anytime you need to kind of chime in or ask a question, please just unmute yourselves and we'll switch over. The one piece of feedback we did get from last week is, if you are speaking online, I think it's helpful if you could show your video if you're appropriately dressed, we'll say. I'm not sure who might be enjoying this presentation in their hot tub, but you never know. But that's kind of the thrust of the class. So, perfect. One of the things I want to talk about in the second class, which will be really important, is sequencing. So last week, we basically started behind the pulpit as far to the cross as you can get and worked our way down back to the elevator bay. And what we were doing was a kind of parallel tracking between the location of the stained glass and the sequence in the Gospels. So as we moved down, we were moving through both location and the Gospels in order. Right, like there were several panels, particularly from Luke, where we did not miss a verse. We were going practically paragraph by paragraph through Luke's gospel. But once we get to the baptismal panel of Jesus, the order as we circle around the church goes out of sequence. That's not to say that they're in the wrong order or they're in the wrong place, but how we're going to track the windows is not going to be sequentially by location, but rather sequentially by their place in the Gospels. And so hopefully this will make sense. So this is the best I could do to find a graphic of the church. This is, I think, one of the designs for the remodel that we ended up not using because there's a baptistry in the old narthex. So John Donnelly can give us some expert advice here. But in terms of the blueprint, I think it gives us all a sense of where things are. So what we did last week was we just kind of came right down this south wall, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got two installations. This is probably the two we're least familiar with, particularly if you're not a member of the choir. So this would have been on the sides of the old choir loft before the remodel. But we've got the wedding at Cana and the Sermon on the Mount in the narthex. And then these are the installations in the chapel. Next week, we're going to go to another one. It's in the same style of our gospel windows, but it's technically a representation from the Pentecost story in Acts. And that's what used to be the old prayer chapel in the old narthex. So we'll look at that in the context of next week's kind of more random spattering of stained glass installations. But this is kind of how our stained glass is installed by location and by sequence in the Gospels. So what I think may have happened, I mean, we can argue a little bit when you're going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We can make some arguments as to what happened when. It's my theory that the first and the third bank of windows in the chapel were inverted the last time they were moved. So probably when the chapel was built in the early 1960s, I think that's when they were moved, presuming that at one point the story was told sequentially by location. So we can look at this photo more to see kind of what didn't happen in the remodel, and maybe John can give us some history on that later. So, and so, are you doing the first one?
I think so.
Okay, perfect.
So, no one really saw until recently with the remodel, because the choir loft was mostly there. The wedding at Cana. So the wedding at Cana is the first story of Jesus coming out, showing his signs in the Gospel of John. And so it reads, on the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does that have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Now there were 6 stone jars there in the Jewish rites of purification, each household 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to his servants, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. And when the master of the feast tasted the water, now became wine, and did not know where it came from. Though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So, we'll take some time to wonder for a bit.
Yeah, so just like last week, we'll kind of, we'll slow look the whole panel, and then we'll kind of do that 45-second kind of top-down pan. And if you go to the next one, it'll
Go back.
so. Yeah, and so what do we notice?
Yeah.
What do we notice? What are we wondering about?
It's interesting to have a cross, because Jesus died on the cross. Down there in the medallion, the 2 wedding rings.
So for those of us sharing online, I'd say if you can do your absolute best to speak way too loud for us in the room so that folks online can hear. Yeah, I'll say for you. So we have one comment saying, interesting that we have the image of the cross before Good Friday down in the medallion with the wedding rings. Yeah.
The wedding rings more like an infinity.
Oh, interesting.
I actually thought it was infinity.
Okay.
I didn't think wedding rings, so.
I'm just gonna kind of tab back and forth. Our friends online, any observations or?
I'm wondering why the person who's the lowest down, it looks so sick. I mean, just weak and in pain or sad, yeah.
Is that Mary bowing?
It is.
I wonder, Mary, but who's the third person standing behind Mary?
Yeah.
Probably a servant, yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like Jesus is either holding or there's a staff behind him, a sunflower motif or something. at the top, which you can only see a part of.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe not.
I think it's probably the basin that was sent to the master.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so to preview a little bit for next week, so next week we're gonna look at one of the installations in the bride's room, which is also a panel from the wedding at Cana. And there we have the servants pouring water into the purification jugs, and so there it's represented as clear liquid. The basin that Jesus is holding reads more like wine. Just, it looks purple, not clear.
And if that is Mary in the foreground, it's interesting that she's in red, kind of yellow and purple, because I don't think we saw her in those colors last week. But maybe that's because it's a wedding.
Maybe.
I think she was in red last week.
Yeah, the red,
Yeah.
the purple.
Yeah,
Oh, she was.
the purple and yellow are new, but
Okay.
yeah.
She had a red dress, but blue Draco.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else that pops out that you're picking up on?
The pot or the jar,
Yeah.
what are they doing with it? I mean, is it, so, I mean, what does it represent? I guess, I think it's probably something very significant.
I think the 6 purification jars, but that is quite small because that doesn't look like it will hold 20 or 30 gallons.
What's at the top of the staff that he has? It looks like a sunset.
Yeah, let me. So I'm going to stop share and then share the whole desktop. Oh, wrong picture. There we go. So there's kind of a closer look at the top of the panel.
The middle looks like the chrysanthemum or the daisy. It almost looks like the sunflower back again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What,
It was probably the heavens.
yeah, what Ryan and I were noticing is that there seems to be a shared visual motif between the sun up here and the interior of the cloak. And again, I don't know if that is significant or if it actually is a shared motif or if it is just sometimes a diamond is just a diamond is just a diamond, as Freud would remind us. But kind of an interesting relationship between the sun and the sun. I think this closer view kind of shows us that this kind of reads as wine. And I think just given the relative age, this looks like a young man at best. But then so here we have Mary in blue, Cindy. But Mary in red was a common feature. And yeah, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the last, oops, didn't mean for that to happen.
I think Katie's dots are gone. I don't see the dots.
The 3 blue dots?
They're there.
Yeah,
They're there, just right here.
I determined they're just filler.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just be empty space. If you look to see how like symmetrical everything is, you know,
Yeah.
on the top all the way down. But now they're known as Katie's dots.
Yeah.
Well, how about that?
Sounds good. Perfect. Again, I just want to give our friends online a chance to share any comments. Okay, perfect. All right. Our next, oops. Okay. So our next installation is the Healing of the Nobleman's Son, in memory of Lieutenant Commander Reuben Hunt of the United States Navy. This comes to us from the Gospel of John, although there's a near analog in the Synoptic Gospels, or at least in Mark, is Mark and Matthew? Healing of the Centurion's Son. And so this is John chapter 4, verses 46 to 54. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When the man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." The father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." And he himself believed, in all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. And so we'll take a kind of a slow look at the entire panel.
D dots, okay.
So what do we notice?
In the story, the son isn't even near Jesus,
Yep,
and there he is.
yep. Yeah, so the analog in the Gospel of Matthew, it's right after the Sermon on the Mount. And there it's also a distance healing. And so somebody cheated on their homework, I think, when they made this panel. So Jesus wasn't there, or the son wasn't there in person, so.
Might have been harder to understand though if the sun wasn't there.
Yeah. Or to put the sun really far away on the horizon, yeah.
So I wonder, in view of the fact that there were other healings which were done
Yeah,
near together, why would you choose to do a story of a healing where you're fictionalizing that they're together when you could have chosen a different healing and it would have been the way the story actually went?
yeah. And I wish our archives could kind of talk about how the stained glass was commissioned. Was it the artist's work alone, or did someone from St. Stephen's say, "Hey, these are the ones we'd like to feature"? And right now it's just a giant unknown. Yeah.
Well, wouldn't the donors have a lot of say-so in it?
I get this sense, so, I just forgot his name. Don Walker wrote the oral history of St. Stephen's, where he interviewed a number of longtime members to get a sense of, reading his history of St. Stephen's, you get the sense that the donations were made after the fact. So it wasn't, you didn't get the impression that like the family of Lieutenant Commander Hunt commission this painting. It was more, we have this stained glass available and someone made a donation to commemorate their loved one. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but that's the impression I get from the oral history that Don Walker wrote. Yeah.
You know, looking back, something like that window could have been the woman who was weaning all the time. She touched his robe.
Yeah.
And that would have, just saying.
Yeah, no, there's a number of miracles that involved the presence of Jesus. So this selection is curious. I think it is a wonderful euphemism to say, I don't know why they did it this way.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
the hands in the lower panel.
Yes.
Cupping something. What are they cupping?
It looks like it's a flame.
Oh, okay.
There we go. And hopefully online we're seeing the whole. Yeah, so I think it reads potentially as an homage to the Holy Spirit or to some spirit working power between Jesus's hands, we presume. Does it read it in? Does anybody else read it in a different way?
I guess for me, it's kind of like when you lay hands on someone, like you
Oh.
invoke the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So like during anointing of the sick, you lay hands on people.
So this is the distance healing in a sense. Is
Yeah.
The healing. Yeah. I like it. So I think what we're going to see tonight. So when Ryan and I went over these panels today, there are some panels that are incredibly straightforward, and we're not going to get a lot of chit chat about them because we kind of see what we see. There are other panels that are going to invite a lot of comments, and I think this one probably falls in the former rather than the latter. Yeah, there's really nothing else I might call your attention to on this panel. So yeah.
The 2 feet, are they, one's wrapped or?
Yeah, Jesus has a hole in his sock, as best I can tell. Yeah, so I think so when we get down, let me zoom out just a little bit. We kind of have the two figures kind of coming together, but I think this pair of feet here are the nobleman's son. They just look a little gaunt, kind of dehydrated almost. I have no idea. So what we'll notice today, maybe we didn't pay enough attention in the first panel, Jesus's footwear seems to change dramatically in the second week panel. So here Jesus seems to be wearing some sort of sock or thong, I'm not sure, but we have Jesus's big toe out on display with none others, and I cannot make sense of it other than to make light of it, as is my nature. So I think the other thing just to notice is we certainly get a sense of wealth from the nobleman, who's presumably the father figure in this. So wearing purple associated with kind of wealth and royalty. His undergarments are kind of a gold color. So I think there obviously is some impression of wealth among the noblemen here, a jewel on the headband. So I think we obviously kind of see signs of wealth there. I don't know if this is a page, perhaps the servant who comes to the nobleman saying your son is healed on this along the way. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's kind of a guess.
You think that toe thing might be the walking? He's walked from Cana to Galilee, right?
Both
He's back in Cana. So we left for chapter 3 to go to Jerusalem. So we've got in chapter 3 we've got the nighttime meeting with Nicodemus and the conversation about how can a person be reborn. So we've made a quick trip to Jerusalem, and now we're back in Cana.
And the only reason I bring it up is because shoes were rare.
Yeah.
And when you think about them walking in that muddy or they would, one of the hospitality things was to bring a bowl of water and wash the guests.
Yeah.
But the.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so now, oops. Oh, I hope that doesn't keep repeating. I hope I don't make that mistake. Yeah. Yeah.
So the next window is the Sermon on the Mount, which is a huge portion, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. But the beginning is, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them.
I thought that would be shorter than all 3 chapters, reading out loud.
Fair.
The one thing I'll add, it's hard to make out on the projected image. It's barely visible on the stained glass on the monitor, but on the oops, didn't mean to close that window. There we go. Let's see if I can zoom in here. There's some etching on the glass. You can't, it's just too hard to see. We've got the Roman numerals 1 through 10, so 1 through 5 and 6 through 10 there. So just a quick, so.
But so what have you noticed or picked up on in the Sermon on the Mount window?
All the faces of his hearers are arrayed for him.
Any idea who you think the hearers are? Yeah.
There's a white one that's going to Jesus.
Which one?
The white one.
Which one's the white one?
The one on the right.
The biggest one in the middle.
Most of them are sort of purple faces, there's one that's.
I mean, this person?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's purple face ones and then there's the white one.
He has a beard, so probably not.
You know?
Judas usually is depicted clean shaven.
Yeah, well, here he's depicted scared. I don't-
7.
Right.
So I guess Matt and I had to Google this, but there are colors associated with the apostles. And so we think the 5 in the back have 2 colors each. So that gets you to 10. And then you have 2 closer in the foreground who have 1 color. So we think that's how you get your 12.
Oh,
And so Matt and I thought this guy back here was Judas,
where? The one
And
that's
why did
on
you
the
think
window?
that?
clean shaven.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can't. you can see
Which
the
one do you
difference.
do it again?
So
Yeah.
like closest to Jesus, but
Uh-huh.
far away.
There you go. That's
Oh,
much better.
yeah,
That's much
okay.
better.
So I just want to stand next to Ryan as he repeats the fact that he thinks that the clean shaven person is the evil person and that the bearded man is the good one, so. So, yeah, so, okay, well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, so this is kind of focusing on the disciples in their robes. So I kind of think, you know, I'm a a Jedi generation, that magical mix between Gen X and millennial. So I go back to the iconography of The Little Mermaid, the Disney cartoon, where every princess or every one of Ariel's sister has a different color fin and shell. So I think that if you take these 5 disciples, and these are meant to be 2 different disciples based on their colors, so that we get 10 here and then 11, 12 disciples. So that's one way to maybe show a stylized 12 disciples.
So next to his outstretched hand are those stars?
I think it's just kind of it's with the I don't know the style for the stained glass, but I don't know if they read as stars, or the blue always reads as stars. There doesn't seem to be anything unique to this installation for this blue. It always seems to have that kind of quality to it.
Why do you think the medallion or the tablets?
Because he's giving the law, just as Moses gave the law. Yeah.
Maybe not so much law, but similar vibe. Yeah, Jesus is on the mountain talking about ethics, I
But
guess.
he's actually building on the law.
Yeah.
The law's in place, and now what are we gonna do with it? We're going to be kind of, bless the poor, for they need a little more abstract.
Yeah, I mean, I quoted so when Jesus in verse 17, do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. The other thing I wanted to call your attention to is we've seen fleur-de-lis in profile. Maybe this is a fleur-de-lis looking kind of straight down the stamen a little bit. Certainly we've got some or lilies. Maybe that's actually, it reads more like lilies now that I think about it.
Fleur-de-lis is an iris.
Yeah, but they're normally kind of stylized as a 3-petal flower. I mean, Jan, am I wrong? These leaves here kind of read as lily? I mean, just my
Yeah, no,
my interpretation, but anything we're wondering about? Any kind of questions come up? This might be one of those straightforward panels. All right. Oh my gosh, it's doing it on everyone. All right, shucks. I copied and pasted the wrong thing. Okay. So this is the blessing of the children. Is this you or me? I can't remember. Did I?
We were just going back and forth.
Okay, sounds good. So this is in memory of Orrin Pitkin. And there's several episodes of this, but I decided to choose the episode from Mark. People were bringing children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them.
you wonder if the artist was trying to, diminish the killing of the children in the other window.
Oh, interesting.
The,
Yeah, from
when they were in Egypt.
the flight into Egypt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
Because they had, do they have children down there? No, they had
yeah. So why don't we take a few moments to kind of slow look this panel. So just want to check in with our friends online. Any comments, any questions?
I don't know, but did you notice there's a different flower in there?
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, or like a rose.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oops. Copied and pasted the wrong thing. Okay. Yeah, what do we notice? What are we wondering about?
Well, as Mindy pointed out, there is a different flower.
Yep.
I see 3 children, and it looks like the one in the foreground is on his knees praying.
Mm-hmm.
There are only 3.
Yeah.
Maybe the second.
Oh, I forgot my pointer. Let me go grab my pointer. So, I'll do it on the next panel while Ryan's talking. Yeah, so there's a few things that I noticed in this one. So one, what we saw first in the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus kind of has a jewel at the kind of clasp of his cloak, which is interesting. The other thing which I think is interesting is, and so Ryan and we've got a couple of different theories. So if where were we? So this is the first one we looked at today, the wedding at Cana. And what we notice is the kind of the fringe of the cope or the cloak is gold in kind of a crenellated shape almost. But when we get to the blessing of the children, it seems to be in the opposite direction. So does it remain as fabric, or if you notice, it seems to be the same width and kind of continues beyond Jesus's halo? So is it fabric, or could it be a kind of spiritual radiance or aura that's surrounding Jesus at this moment? I'm not sure of a show of hands of what you think, but does it read as cloth, or does it read as spirit to you guys? No. I may be clean shaven, but the people are with me. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think
It's useful now.
it's almost useful. So Ryan and I think came to the conclusion that this may be a columbine flower, which I don't really associate with places outside of North America. It obviously, to me, it's an alpine flower. But doing some research, the columbine is a potential symbol of the Trinity, because the word columbine derives from the Latin word for dove. But it is a 5-petal flower. So I'm not, this is where, and maybe Karen McGuinn can chime in on this one. I'm not sure how you get a flower that represents the Trinity with the 5 petals, but maybe it's just the Latin word for dove that's carrying most of that interpretive weight there. But the columbine is a symbol of life after death. It certainly was a appropriate and lasting image after the Columbine massacre back in 1998, right? I mean, the Columbine was itself a symbol of the community renewal that happened after the shooting in Colorado back, 27 years ago now. Any other thoughts, or I think you want to talk about the medallion? I think that was your good observation.
Yeah, so what have you noticed about the medallion?
It's the blessing
Yeah.
gesture.
Yeah. Do you know what this blessing means? Or why?
I was told in college that 2 fingers down represents the dual nature of Christ, and 3 fingers up represents the Trinity.
Yeah.
Unless you do it this way, which is the other way around. So there was supposedly a big schism as to which way, so this would be the Trinity pointing down and the dual nature pointing down. That's according to one of my professors.
Interesting. Yeah, I also know that like bishops are, I've been told bishops are the only ones who are supposed to bless this way. I don't trust the source that told me that, but I haven't actually questioned it. I've corrected him. Oh, I corrected.
Did the source have a beard? That's Mike's joke.
Did actually, but I corrected him on a church history that I'm like, I don't trust you.
Oh,
But I have not been brave enough to do it around a bishop, so
Has he ever done it around you?
I've not met Austin yet.
all right. Yeah. I just hope that doesn't mean anything. Okay, all right. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna go get my fun laser pointer as you.
Bless you.
So we have the feeding, miracle of the loaves and the fishes. So I guess one that we have, I believe this is the only thing that comes in all four Gospels, story-wise. But so this one is from let me minimize them real quick, from the Gospel of Matthew. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to the deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and had compassion on them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, or deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said to them, "Bring them here to me." And he ordered the crowds to sit on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up at heaven and blessed and broke those and gave them to his disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Jesus has purple shoes. So what did you notice?
So the disciples are bare feet, but Jesus is wearing some kind of red booties.
Yeah.
Yet another form of footwear.
I got my laser back.
What else? Anything else that popped out that surprised you?
The waves of the water at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
they're beside the lake.
Yeah. Does that look like calm water?
But how do you depict calm water? Easier to draw.
Could be green grass.
Anything else? Anything that pops out?
Seems like a farce depiction of something, a story of such abundance.
Yeah, I only count 3 loaves and 1 fish in the picture.
Well, and the fish on the platter to my eye, looked like it was just the skeleton of the fish, and I thought, no, I must be just reading it wrong.
Maybe it's been eaten.
Yeah, no, maybe it's been eaten.
Big clean. Big clean.
There we go.
That's right, that's what I put. There it is, yeah.
No, it's just the fins, I think it's just, yeah, it must just be like light and reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No medallion.
Yeah, doesn't have a clasp.
I know, but
I must say, I love the smile of the fish in this one.
Yeah.
There.
So one of the things, so when you compare all four gospels and you look for some commonalities, the feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the only miracle that happens in all four gospels. And in each of the four gospels, the story that always immediately follows the feeding of the 5,000 is the calming of the storm. And so Betsy noticed the water. So it's either a reference to the fact that Jesus was kind of in a deserted place near the Sea of Galilee when this miracle happened. But I think the kind of rushing waves are a little bit of a homage or a preview of what's to come in a panel that isn't depicted in our stained glass, the Jesus stilling the storm. Yeah.
Can I ask a crazy question?
Absolutely.
A couple weeks ago, we talked about Simon
Yes.
in the boat,
Mhm.
and the fish he was feeding, you remember that?
Mhm.
Yep.
And I'm a little confused about this and that. Could you tell me,
Dear me, sir.
explain, I'm out of context or something?
I guess it's two different stories. The
I
one
know,
that,
I
yeah.
know that, yeah.
So many of the disciples were fisher
Yes.
people. So I guess in the story that we heard was just kind of a miracle trying to call his first disciples, kind of,
Yeah,
hey, I have some cool stuff, just go, trust me,
yes,
and we'll see what happens.
okay.
This is more or less a miracle of an abundance, I guess.
They're both miracles is what we're talking here now, right?
Maybe like the one that we heard 2 weeks ago is
Yeah.
probably a minor one.
Okay.
I would say it's more of a calling story than a miracle.
Okay.
I mean, it was rather miraculous what happened, but I think it was more of a sign to Simon Peter, the Zebedee brothers.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you. Sort of made me think this was sort of repetitious in this way. There were two happenings going on.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, yeah.
And strangely, Mark and Matthew have a feeding of the 4,000
Yes.
Chapter later.
a chapter later. So
Yeah.
this story, there is a lot of repetition, and I think that's why the Vesica Pisces shape is so interesting, is that fish is such a common and recurring symbol throughout the Gospels, yeah. I'll admit, I'm feeling self-conscious because the peanut gallery online seems to be quieter. I just want to check in. Are you guys able to hear us okay? Has there been anyone brave enough to chime in from online?
I'm hearing very well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. All right. By next week, I'm going to get the keynote correct, I promise. So, all right. So this is The Good Shepherd, in appreciation of our children by Mr. and Mrs. Hockenbeamer. And this is taken from the Gospel of John. for space and for brevity's sake, I took out a few verses. So this is verses 1 to 5 and 11 to 16. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have some other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, so there will be one flock and one shepherd. Oh, I just noticed something that we didn't talk about. How about that? So we'll do a slow look. So what do we notice?
There's, on both sides, there's a little splotch of, looks like, it almost looks like Nina from here, but it's not. It's red and white. And it's,
Right here.
no, go to the edge. I think it's more the edge. Go up close.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just an interesting, having looked at the others, it's an interesting change.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's the same color as these two panels above it.
Yeah.
And some below.
Yeah, yeah.
In this one, it looks as though, again, the halo has, it looks like the little blue or
Mhm.
aqua-colored wavy lines are an extension of the halo and
Yeah.
surround Jesus like we saw in the Blessed.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the things I noticed is that the longer you look at the kind of aqua color around Jesus, the more disjointed it feels. It feels like a picture that didn't download properly because the aura seems to shift. Like it just doesn't line up right here. And that's just incredibly frustrating to my eye. It just kind of feels jarring. Did you want to share your theory on the?
Oh, that it kind of looks
Yeah.
like our, it kind of reminds me of like Our Lady of Guadalupe, like the same like blue frill around her.
Mhm.
Why, I don't really know, but that was what was coming to my mind.
Trivia question: why are most humans right-handed? Anyone know? Think back to child rearing. Most mothers will hold a baby with their left arm because that's closer to their heart. And listening to the murmur of a heart kind of reminds the baby that they're back in the womb and settles them down. So most mothers will hold their infants in their left hands, leaving their right hand free to do other tasks. I really am struck by how Jesus is holding the sheep, kind of close to his bosom. It feels very parental in that regard. The thing I just noticed is it's either a very thin cross, it almost looks like a recticle. The red behind Jesus's head here. Just noticed that for the first time this evening.
He's got shepherd staffs.
Yeah, thank you.
Waist high.
What's interesting though is they're not symmetrical. So this one has more of a crook, and this one feels a little bit more staff-like. So in my mind, this reads is Psalm 23, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I think you definitely get, I apologize, this, in the window, this reads more green. It's looking kind of like a pale yellow here. But up in the chapel, this definitely reads more like grass, kind of a green there. And so to me, it's referencing or makes allusion to Psalm 23 in my mind, precisely because these two elements are not symmetrical. The other thing that was interesting to me is this is not an image of the Good Shepherd or of the Angus Dei, the Lamb of God, that I'm usually associated with. So normally the kind of Lamb of God is this. It's got the kind of St. George's flag behind it. It's a symbol of Jesus. This seems to be more focusing just on the lamb's head. And so I wonder, is this calling our attention to the sheep, us being one of the sheep, rather than to the role of the shepherd? I'm not sure how you all might read that, but it was just kind of interesting that that's not the kind of Lamb of God image that I'm usually accustomed to seeing, the Angus Dei.
Question. Is it significant that the lamb Jesus is holding is a young lamb and the lower one is a full-grown sheep?
Yeah, what do you think that might mean, Nancy? Great observation.
I don't know. I just wondered,
Okay.
there must be a reason for that.
I think that's why it feels parental, is because it is such a young lamb in his arms. And then, Mindy, you asked, so this is typically known as the flag of St. George, which represents jolly old England.
But isn't there a Scandinavian country that has that flag?
White with red, no. Sweden would be blue field with a gold cross.
Norway is red, or Denmark is red background with white cross. Maybe Finland. No, Finland's blue.
Anyway,
Yeah,
you look at those flags and you always wonder who's
Yeah.
up to get it first.
Georgia,
yeah,
Georgia, the country,
yeah.
named after St. George.
Yeah.
They've got the double. Well, yeah, they have the ones in the corner, but like the base of the flag is
Yeah.
the cross of St. George.
Yeah. Great.
What's up with his feet?
I don't know. We're back into kind of purple socks. Yeah,
They're sandals.
yeah.
What?
I think those are the Birkenstock 602s.
I don't see it as well.
It just keeps happening.
Yeah, that helps.
And then that disappears for some unknown reason. All right.
The raising of Lazarus. So this is comes from the Gospel of John. Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was laying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you will always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth and his face wrapped in cloth. Jesus said to them, Unbind him and let him go. Yeah, empty tomb. The question was about what the medallion was. Empty tomb. What?
Yeah. No spoilers, no spoilers.
But so I guess what have you picked up? What have you noticed?
Well, there was somebody with Lazarus, with,
Yeah, it's the person moving the stone.
moved the stone. Oh, yes, so he has his arm on the stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
The text says it's a sister.
Not the one who moved the stone. There was a crowd.
Yeah, sorry, the story of Lazarus takes up almost all of chapter 11 of John's Gospel. We just kind of chose the revivification, to steal a word from Ryan earlier this afternoon. So just the kind of the command for Lazarus to come out. So we just focused on the scene depicted by the stained glass as best we could.
Anything else? Or is this one of those rather straightforward?
I think it's, Jesus's footwear is a little easier to see. And
Yes.
Yes, but they're now brown.
Yeah.
Right, they're brown and they're clearly sandals.
Can I hop in?
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting to me is if you look at Lazarus, it seems to be a staged resuscitation or revivification or reanimation. Ryan and I think, are just being particularly careful. It is not a resurrection. That comes later. Jesus is the first to be resurrected. So it's either a resuscitation, a revivification, a reanimation. But Lazarus does not read as alive to me. His eyes are closed. His body looks limp. Jesus has his hand up. Puppeteer feels crass in a way that I don't intend it, but it very much feels like Jesus is kind of pulling Lazarus out of the grave. It feels kind of like a marionette in a way. You kind of you get the sense that Jesus is engaged in kind of pulling this up, pulling Lazarus up, but for whatever reason, Lazarus isn't animated yet, and so I don't know if you get what your guys' sense of the text is. I'll get you 1 second, Minnie. I don't know what your sense of the text is, but it's interesting to me that the stained glass reads a kind of staged, lifted up out of the tomb and then reanimated or revivified. We've hit the thesaurus hard this afternoon for synonyms for resurrection. But the Apostle Paul would be furious with us if we said that Lazarus was resurrected first. So
Reading that too.
yeah. So anything I can do to not have Paul angry at me in the afterlife for anything more than I said during my seminary career, I'm trying. That's what I'm trying for. Mindy, you had a quote.
You don't see references to Lazarus much, but in some fictionalized books, he actually says to Jesus, "What did you do to me? I didn't want this. I don't want to be whatever." you
Yeah.
did." And that picture or that representation kind of gets to that, because you're sitting there, you died, you've gone to wherever. What did you do to me?
Yeah, I was talking to Ryan about this afternoon. There's I can't remember if it's a letter or an essay, but C.S. Lewis talks about how torturous it must have been for Lazarus to be to be held in the joys of heaven, only to be kind of brought back to the mundane existence of earthly life. And I think it's such a jarring. It's not how we expect our attitude about being brought back to life, right? Like, if I could just have one more day, right? Here, what your reference to what C.S. Lewis talks about is like, heaven was fantastic. Why would you bring me back? Is not how many of us would think about the gift of one more day after our deaths. I mean,
It would have to approach, as you weren't breathing and all of a sudden you're starting to.
Yeah.
do that kind of stuff. So you
Well-
kind of,
And he stunk, so there's some amount of,
was it the
Do-
King James version that said, the sister said, "Stinking"?
well, it's,
Yeah.
right there it said there's a stench.
yeah, it's been 4 days. There's already a great stench. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's one Bible that says he stinketh, which is kind of, I don't know, it's used.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. John made the joke. We're going to see this again, right? There's a lot of wonderful scholarship comparing and contrasting the reanimation of Lazarus to the resurrection of Jesus, right? And so there are some similarities, right? So particularly in Matthew, but in the other Gospels as well, there's a very strong sense of a time deadline on Good Friday. We have to get Jesus in the tomb before sunset so that we're not defiled for the Passover meal, at least in John's dating. And so the whole point of Easter is Joseph of Arimathea did not have time to anoint Jesus's body to decompose well. And so the women, so after the Sabbath is over, they go precisely to anoint Jesus's dead body with the sweet smelling herbs and lotions, and so that he doesn't stink, right? Because the practice of burial at this time is you let a body kind of decompose, and then you take the bones and you kind of put it in a small ossuary box so that you can reuse the tomb, right? I mean, that's part of where kind of early anti-Christian apologetics is like, oh, well, they put him in a tomb that's been used before. It's like, no, this is a tomb that no one had been laid in before, right? There's all these details. One of the other details that really contrasts Lazarus and Jesus is Lazarus remains tied in these burial cloths, right? Jesus says, unbind him, which many prefigure as we're going to unbind the power of death. But when Jesus is resurrected, in John's gospel, the beloved disciple, Peter, the women, they all find Jesus's laundry folded neatly because they won't be needed or used again, right? Lazarus will be reburied. He will experience death a second time. Jesus will not, right? And so Jesus puts away his burial cloth, he doesn't need it anymore. And so it's a wonderful kind of contrast between what happened to Lazarus and what happened to Jesus. Jesus doesn't need his burial robes anymore after the resurrection. I'm sorry I just ruined that sermon for like 2 years from now, but forget it by then and it'll all be new for you. So, anybody online? Any comments, questions, concerns, hopes? Nope. Anything good for dinner at home? I don't know what to ask. So, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the thing at the bottom there that looks like an old computer? That one.
Oh, yeah. So I think this is just another representation of the tomb.
I see. Okay.
It's the same kind of square block that this gentleman is holding. So I think it's just a representation of Lazarus's tomb.
And the white part is the stone or the slab over the front?
I think so, yeah. That's a good, that's what I think anyway.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. All right. So we're coming to the last two. So the Last Supper is obviously an episode that takes place in all four Gospels. It, depending on the Gospel, takes up a large part of the narrative. I think in John's Gospel, I think it takes a full 6 chapters just to get through dinner. So what I did was try the briefest episode or description of the Last Supper. If you're looking for brevity, it's always going to be Mark will be your friend. So this is from Mark chapter 14. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take it, this is my body. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said to them. Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So we'll take a slow look again. It looked pretty smooth. There's a little bit of a lag, yeah. So the one thing I just want to bring your attention to it now, because we have a unique situation where in these last 2 panels, we have a near repetition in the medallion. So here at the Last Supper, we've got obviously a Eucharistic, we have the bread and the cup. So just kind of keep this in the back of your mind as we go to the next panel, because the artist is going to do something I think that's both clever and theologically significant when we get to the next panel. But what do we notice?
The table is in the shape of a omega.
You beat me to it. You're making me look smart. Thank you, Betsy. Yep.
I thought in that time period, they were doing the reclining on the sofas.
Yeah.
Not at Passover.
Don't they recline at Passover? Isn't that part of the Seder?
That, I don't remember.
I've never seen that.
All right, I think we need to break out our Haggadah.
It was the Romans, et cetera, and this was a dress-up formal meal.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I thought that there's some part of the Seder that invokes rest as a gift from God, particularly in kind of contrast to like the matzah, right? So the meal commemorates the hurriedness, the flight out of Egypt, but the meal that commemorates it is a gift of kind of time. So I thought that there was some element of reclining during a Seder, but I will reach out to some of my Jewish friends to. Is this thee or me?
I don't know.
Okay. So let me go here. So I know we read from the Gospel of Mark. I think this is probably a depiction from the Gospel of John, which is a strange thing to say. You think the dinner is going to be the same all the time. But there's a couple of clues. So Peter is often depicted as bald, or at least a receding hairline. So I think Peter is either here, although he could be here as well. As someone with a receding hairline myself, I'm somewhat of an expert on this. So that leads me to think that, so remember, left and right are theologically very significant positions in relationship to Jesus. So the right hand is the blessing side. The left hand is the kind of the cursed side. So at Jesus's right hand, this is likely the beloved disciple, the one who does kind of sit and recline against Jesus in John's gospel, which leads us to, so the Latin word for left is sinister, which, or sinistra, sorry, excuse me. That's right, it is feminine. I forgot that.
Well, you can make it all three.
Okay. All right, well, okay, you're depicting it as feminine, which is,
Tell them what the word that we get from.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think many of us would recognize that it's sinister, right? And that's why people with left hands were kind of beaten with rulers to kind of train it out of them, is because they thought it was a mark of evilness or sinisterness. Green with envy is a color associated with Judas. So I'm thinking so it's the left-hand side. He's the only person at the table without a halo. And he's dressed in the greed of green. So I think this is most likely going to be our dear friend Judas. Betsy already kind of hit my most intelligent thought on this, which is the table reads like the Greek letter omega, which is, if we remember the book of Revelation, Jesus says, I am the Alpha and I am the Omega, I am the beginning and I am the end, as Omega was the last letter in the Greek alphabet. Ryan then immediately, as I said, like, oh, that reads like an Omega, he immediately asks, where is the Alpha? And so we tried to go back and try to find the Alpha. I am kind of running back to the imagery and the interpretation from the Da Vinci Code from 25 or almost 25 years ago. So there was some creative analysis of Da Vinci's Last Supper, where the kind of the chalice and the blade imagery. So I think if we wanted to force an alpha and an omega into this scene, I think that Jesus becomes the shape of his shoulders and his cope may suggest the alpha. This might be the thinnest ice I'm skating on tonight, and that's fine. I can swim pretty well. But if we need to have an alpha to mirror the omega, that would be my best guess. But if I forced you to come up with something theologically significant before I let you guys go home tonight, we would be very inventive. And so this may just be my over-exercised creativity muscle this afternoon. I don't know if it's actually there or not, but Betsy, I read it the same way. I read it as the Last Supper. I read it as the Omega.
And since it's the last, maybe that's the explanation for the
Yeah. We certainly have the bread and the wine, certainly given center stage here. We see the disciples kind of praying. Anything else we notice?
What's that above the, what is above the, wine and the bread? That,
Right here?
yes, what is that?
I think that's probably just the interior of the table, like a tablecloth almost.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially, it reads more like a tablecloth when you look at the end of the table. Yeah. You know, one of my earlier thoughts too was, and one of the reasons why I read it as an omega is it would be easier just to have it sitting at a table, right? And so is there a little bit of Da Vinci's Last Supper, but forced into the shape of our mandala to kind of give us this perspective? Is it almost like a warped fisheye view of the table? I'm reminded of how difficult it was for Jesus on the Passover night to go to a restaurant and ask for a table for 26. And the hostess said, 26, there's only 13 of you. And he says, I know, we're only using half the table. Oh, that joke bombed hard. Wow. I'm glad I used it here and not in the pulpit. Okay.
Don't forget to tip your waiters.
Yeah, okay. I'm done. That joke bombed so hard, I am out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, your associate rector, Ryan Zavacki, is up next. So, yes.
Can you go back? What?
I don't want to. I'm running away from my bad joke.
Kind of change the subject.
Please do, yes.
But I only see 10 like bowls or vessels. Is there
Oh.
any?
Well, there's the glass and.
And then there's the chalice.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 people didn't get to eat.
Isn't there anything?
Yeah, thank you for noticing that I didn't catch it. Any guesses? Or
No, I look in the same.
Looking to you, the expert.
we're all experts. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's a great observation.
Well, I guess depending on the gospel story, I think Judas only has communion in one of them, right? Or it's implied.
Say that again.
I think only one story of the Eucharist has Judas taking it. All the other ones he leaves before. Like
Yeah.
John he leaves right before.
Right.
So they would only have
So then
11.
there'd be 11.
There are 12, if you count the one that Jesus has, with the one foot of the table. St. John.
You mean in the medallion?
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, because so if Judas leaves, then we have 11 cups for 12 people. Yeah.
And who's the one on the other side of Jesus? I'm sorry, I don't.
Probably the beloved disciple from the Gospel of John. So one of the, when we list the 12 disciples, the 4 different Gospels give slightly different lists for who are among the 4 different. So in John, it's Nathaniel. In Luke, he becomes Bartholomew. So there's a few people that we think were known by different names or just different lists. But it's given his inclination and his closeness, I would venture it's probably the beloved disciple. The other thing that's interesting is in John's gospel, the beloved disciple doesn't fail Jesus at the cross. So the beloved disciple is there at the foot of the cross, where in the other gospels, all of the disciples have scattered and run for their own lives. There and only in the Gospel of John, we kind of have that reorientation of family, the, you know, mother, behold this your son, son, behold this your mother. But that's an episode unique to John's gospel. So, yeah. All right, our last panel tonight.
So Christ in Gethsemane, in memory of Mr. and Mrs. James Boyd. So this is the
Sorry about that.
words.
Oh, you clicked it twice.
Sorry.
There we go. Hopefully that'll hold. Nope, we're back to that same nonsense of before. Sorry.
No worries.
There we go.
They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and he prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." What's interesting?
The cross has replaced the bread.
Mhm.
They've already eaten the bread. The body of Christ, so no death and cross.
Mhm.
You're right, that's creative.
What else did you notice in this image? What was popping out?
What are those three, they aren't angels, what are they? Right there, yeah, they.
Sleeping disciples.
The disciples.
Yeah.
Three of them are asleep. Is that,
Mhm.
are they asleep?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good.
They're kind of rolled up in the fetal position, kind of,
Yeah.
or in a ball, kind of sleeping on their forearms.
So where are the other 8?
Well, the story said he only brought 3. Peter,
No.
James, and John.
No, Mark is different.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought I just read that.
I think, oh, it is, okay, sorry, you're right. I was reading a different gospel. Yep. Sorry. Perfect. Yes, so it's either a reference to the 3 disciples who were sleeping, or it's kind of, that he found the disciples sleeping 3 times. So it works on either a temporal or a literal or a temporal plane, I think.
It looks like the angel at the top is holding a chalice.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
What do you think that's showing?
the same angel who, when he was baptized, when he was born, etc.
He
Is
says,
that Gabriel?
take this cup away from me, so
Yeah.
is that the cup?
He's got the cup, but,
It's not taken away from him though.
Yeah.
well, they're just in the little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I wonder about is this kind of a visualization of Jesus's prayer? It seems to connect Jesus to presumably an angel of the Lord, right? Sometimes a mouthpiece for God. And yeah, I think this is very clearly the cup that Jesus asks to be passed over him. But, you know, the most solemn part of that prayer is, but not as I will, but as you will, right? And so that the cup remains for Jesus to drink from. And as we notice here at the bottom, the bread, when Jesus says, you know, this is my body given for you, the medallion seems to reflect that theology perfectly, in that Jesus's body is going to be on the cross after this episode. This is what I've got a whole bunch of wondering about. So we've got this path or something that kind of leads from the garden. You might just barely read roots right down here, kind of like a tree. But whether it's a tree or a vine or...
I thought it was a snake.
Oh, interesting.
Looks like it to me.
A snake?
A snake. I don't know, I just.
Yeah. Well, you know, if we remember The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie from the early 2000s, this scene ends with Jesus stepping on a snake. That kind of it's the opposite of the last temptation of Christ, right? It's that Jesus is now resolute, that all temptation, the prayer, Jesus says the prayer in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, let this cup pass over me. It doesn't, and then it's this resolute moment of no temptation will stop me from here until we get to the end, till in the Gospel of John, till it is finished, right? But this reads a couple of ways to me. I'm wondering kind of how it reads to you. I get some sunshine vibes here. I get sunrise. And so I wonder, you know, this kind of has that same kind of mandala shape, which we talked about last week, which certainly has references and allusions to human anatomy. So could it be this is a path that leads to the resurrection? Is this a brief glimpse into Easter Sunday? Is that kind of the sunrise over what will be the empty tomb? I don't know how you read it, but why we frame this whole class is what do we notice? What do we wonder about? I just have a ton of wondering questions about this path and this this horizon.
But could it go along with the snake theory, eat the tree of life, that you go back to in Genesis?
Yeah.
I was gonna say earth, wind, and fire, but that, instead of a snake, it could be.
Okay. Elemental.
See, I kind of think it's the death of that tree of life, and then Matt, you pointed out earlier today that it's almost like a seed, the three apostles.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry.
That blue thing?
No.
No. The
The
apostles are almost shaped like a seed.
But a seed.
So like,
Oh, the seed just.
it
spread
usually like seeds sprout in 3 days, generally. So what? Well, yeah, yeah. But so like the tree looks withered, it's brown, it's dead, but then something new will come with the apostles. That was kind of my logic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so particularly when we read some of the parables of Jesus, right? The seed has to die in order to produce fruit, right? There's no seed that gets to continue on its happy little path being a seed, right? And so is this an occasion where the faithlessness of the disciples will die, right? I mean, this has always been the easiest way to understand the truth of Easter is how much the lives of the disciples changed, right? They were ne'er-do-wells. Jesus keeps complaining, you of little faith. You don't get it, you don't understand. And then something happens, they all run scattered and afraid. And then something happens right on that Easter day, and they turn into courageous, powerful speakers whose faithfulness for 10 out of these 11, and eventually 11 out of the 12, once we bring Matthias into the fold in the beginning of Acts to replace Judas, all but one of them die martyrs, right? And none of their martyrdoms are what we would call pleasant or suitable for TV. And so none of the, nobody dies for a lie, right? And so the easiest thing to think of is something happened that was so powerful that it changed these disciples' lives forever. And the only thing that seems to make sense is they ran into a guy they were pretty sure, were certain was absolutely dead. And something happened to him. And then something happened to the disciples as a result of that. So this reads as a seed, the kind of seed of faithlessness blossoming and turning into the fruits of the Spirit and grace given after the resurrection.
I'd like to ask one more question. The men that did these,
Yeah.
I wonder how the procedure went. They made a deal, the church and this man, and they just told him, we want these stained glass windows and we want you to go this way, with the Bible stories and all that. And then he was on his own, or was something.
Likely, yeah.
Was there input as like the creative process happened? Was it
Yes,
all-
I mean,
yeah.
so it's what,
Did he
it's
have input
interesting
from others?
that we're looking at his thoughts, we're looking
Yeah.
at his thoughts,
Interpretations.
and yet we all have different thoughts. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, I just.
Yeah.
And then
We
once
gave
the
him a lot
commission
of
was
credit,
done, did he?
In religious art, though, a lot of those are common, like the red. Okay, oh, yes, yeah, the colors, yeah. And the fish, and the omega, et cetera. So I still think he must have had a whole portfolio of ideas. Yeah.
So I guess then that makes me wonder, if this was from a shop in
Oakland.
Berkeley, did you say Oakland?
Oakland, yeah.
Do we know of any other churches where this work would be seen?
That's a great question. We'd have to do some deep digging to see if there's anybody like the person. Unfortunately, I don't think our new bishop or our new canon of the ordinary have had the traveling experience. I think that there's some people involved in the diocese, like Karen Miles would be a great idea of like, hey, if you've been to a number of the churches in the diocese, who has stained glass that looks like ours? And then maybe we could contact them and like, hey, who built your stained glass? Because it definitely has a flavor or quality, and maybe we could cross-reference it. But short of that, I don't know how else we might be able
Because
to.
that shop doesn't exist anymore.
No.
But the Oakland Museum,
They have somebody there.
they may have.
Oh, that's a great
They
idea.
may have filed his portfolio.
Yeah, interesting.
What's his name? Colbert?
I'd have to look up last week's.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Don't do it now.
yeah.
Don't do it now.
Yeah.
And this was in the 50s. So I wonder what his age was when he did this. How old was man was he?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm wondering. It takes time.
No, I mean, what we saw from last week, so the nativity stained glass was here at St. Stephen's in 1954. So at least, but what we'll see next week, and so kind of did this so we have two more windows to look at in the gospel sequence, and that is fittingly the resurrection and the ascension. Those are the two installations that are on either side of the great cross in our sanctuary. But what you'll notice immediately, particularly with the appearance of Jesus, is this is done by a different artist in a very different, far more kind of a Tiffany style stained glass than the rest of our gospel windows. And I don't have the data in the archives, but we know the name of the artist who did those installations, different from the other ones. What we don't know is what happened to the original stained glass that used to be in those same installation, or in those same cavities, because they're not what we saw in the 1954 photos of the sanctuary. And so,
They had to remove those, but
yeah,
maybe they just were broken up and thrown away. Well, I wouldn't want that to happen, but you never know.
yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, the honest answer is I don't know, but I think we know there was a change. We don't exactly know why the change, but we have a different artist in a slightly different time period. The other thing that we'll see, I haven't done that research, that's next week's problem, is so in the narthex, in the bride's room, I think we have some similar visual cues. I'm not sure if it's the same artist or if it's a second artist who is reflecting kind of the iconography, particularly of Jesus in the wedding at Cana. It seems to be, it's either the same artist, but maybe 10 years later, or it's a different artist trying to emulate what that artist saw in the installation. You have some information?
The walls that have the windows in them that you're referring to were built in the 63 remodel.
Yeah, exactly.
In 1960, they did not exist.
Right.
So those windows have to be new, may or may not be by the same artist, but that was all new construction.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's what I don't know. Is it just the artist 10 years later with a slightly...
Now, the two windows that you're referring to on either side of the former choir wall.
Yeah.
Those, I believe, based on some photos, were originally in the back wall on each
Yes.
side of the entrance.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And we'll show some photos of those next week. Yeah. So, great. Cool. And then kind of close, so that's kind of where we're closed tonight. Any kind of thoughts on week 2 on the second half of our windows? Next week we'll kind of look at our other installations. But for those of you joining online or in person, kind of any thoughts or observations just kind of generally in this our second week of this multicolored gospel?
Looking at them in this way, which I never did before, there's such a thread of design that goes through them all. It's just interesting, to imagine perhaps the artist sitting down with the people who were commissioning the build and saying, here's what I normally do for churches. Here's some sketches. I do one like this and one like this and one like this, and then them saying, yeah, okay, yeah, go do it. And of course, the sketch is one thing, and the finished product is something altogether different. Lucky, of course, that they got the results that they got.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a, the visual motif is so wonderfully rendered throughout the collection of those windows. It really is, it gives us something makes it easier to interpret, right? I mean, if we had a different visual language, if we had different shapes, right? But keeping those visual motifs, the medallion, the mandala, it really makes it easier for us to understand what's happening because it draws our attention. It's such a wonderful tool for focusing our attention that we're not worried about figuring out what's going on because our attention is dropped right to where it should be. It's great design. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, at least this time I got you out in under 2 hours, so a small thing. So, but thank you all, and just as a reminder, so this is all recorded and posted straight to YouTube tonight, so we don't have to worry about uploading the video. So if you ever want to search the St. Stephen's handle on YouTube or St. Stephen's Orinda, just like our email address, it's part of our online learning library. But thank you all for being here tonight. Next week, we'll finish off this series with our kind of miscellaneous stained glass, the patriarchs and prophets, the work of the library. We got some great things to finish with. And then if you just want to keep coming to church Wednesday nights for the next 2 months, we'll have activities for you. So in 2 weeks, we've got Ash Wednesday. That'll be preceded a day by our Pancake Shrove Tuesday supper. Much earlier in our calendar, in 2 days, we've got a great party. We saw Tom Camp, our friar, come in with ribs and wine and all sorts of ice cream sandwiches. So Friday night, we'd love to have you join us right back here for the stewardship thank you and welcome to Reverend Ryan. So we'll hopefully see you Friday night, and we'll hopefully see you over the weekend as well. So thank you all. Appreciate it.